This is the 1947 version of the hapless St. Louis Browns. Just above the reference to Bob Moncrief is number 36. In December of 1946, Bemis Point's Walter Brown signed a professional contract with the American League Baseball Company of St. Louis, also known as the St. Louis Browns. Walter Irving Brown was born April 23, 1915, and found his way to the St. Louis Browns in 1947, where Walter was 1-0 in 19 games with an ERA of 4.89. A real local hero. Our other local connection to the St. Louis Browns is Fred Marsh. Fred was born January 5th, 1924 in Valley Falls, Kansas. He made his Major League debut with Cleveland, and then in 1951 joined the St. Louis Browns and was with them twice in 1952. He then finished his career with stints with the Chicago White Sox and the Baltimore Orioles. Fred currently resides in Corey, Pennsylvania, and has been a guest of the Hot Stove Luncheon. He had a 7-year career with a combined batting average of .239.
During the 30s, 40s, and 50s, baseball had a clearly defined...
Browns, 1 year, 1,000 for the season.
You couldn't win.
You owe $200,000, you can't start the season unless you pay.
And I remember the St. Louis Browns sent me a deck of on it. And I got to tell you, I was so infuriated.
Owner was Bill Veeck, baseball's greatest showman. He is best remembered for his years at the helm of the hapless St. Louis Browns, where he staged Grandstand Manager's Day, in which fans voted on what the Browns should do next on the field. But his most memorable stunt took place during a game between the Browns and the Tigers. In the first inning, Veeck sent in a pinch hitter, Eddie Gaedel, a midget who stood just 3 feet 7 inches tall. His strike zone was said to measure 1 1/2 inches. Veeck told Goodell that a man in the stands with a high-powered rifle would shoot him if he swung at a pitch. Goodell obeyed. The Tiger pitcher walked him on 4 straight pitches, all of them high.
I once ran into Eddie Gaedel. He batted once and he got a walk because the pitcher of the Tigers, Kane, fell off the mound watching it and laughed, and so did the catcher, Bob Swift. Eddie got a walk on 4 pitches. Eddie said, "I'm disappointed in Mr. Veeck," in his little piping voice. "He promised me I'd keep on playing baseball. I batted only once, but I got on base."
Veeck got the press he'd wanted. "All I have ever said," Veeck told his critics, "is that you can draw more people with a losing team plus bread and circuses than with a losing team and a long, still silence." But few cities could now support 2 major league teams. In 1953, the Braves left Boston to the Red Sox and moved to Milwaukee, where they drew the biggest crowds in baseball. 2 years later, the Athletics left Philadelphia for Kansas City. Even Bill Veeck conceded defeat. The Browns abandoned St. Louis and moved to Baltimore, where they became the Orioles.
Or more accurately, change what we have left to re...
Are you the family spokesperson?
Well, I see my brother has arrived, so I'm sure he can maybe add to some of this. Since I'm the youngest of his 4 sons, my dad was a relief pitcher in 1947 with the Browns. Prior to turning pro, in 1939, my dad at that time was playing with the Kilgore Bombers. During, Dad had proposed to her, and she ended up going down to Kilgore, and prior to a game, they got married at home plate in front of probably 2,800 people, and the team ended up buying a Model 8 Ford for their wedding. And then after that, Dad moved on where he played, started, I believe, around 43 through 46 with the Toledo Mudhens, the AAA farm team for the St. Louis Browns. And I guess I always asked him, I guess that was his dream. This finally came true as far as, you know, making it to the big time where he got moved up in 47 with the 47 Browns. I found out probably more since I was born in '54. That was the year he quit playing baseball. He ended up in the Canadian League. So I found out as I grew older and found out things that my dad really had achieved throughout his life. It was, you know, it was kind of neat. As far as I gathered the information for him to accompany Mr. Dietrich and 9 others for the inductee of the Wichita County Hall of Fame. And but I always asked him, I said, well, Dad, what was your, you know, once you got there to the big time, what was your favorite moment? And he told me he beat Casey Stengel on the Yankees. And that was his highlight of his career. He thought that was, you know, the greatest thing. One thing he did always mention too, he got the chance, he said he struck out Ted Williams twice, but he said with a smile, he says, yeah, he said he had him, could have been 3 in a row, but he ended up getting, he had a high towering shot, and that one, he said the wind carried out. That was a grand slam.
Yeah. He should have walked him.
So that, you know, he got a big, with a smile on that. Also, when in 1963, in June 3rd, he drove to New York City. He played in the Old Timers game at the Polio Grounds, and which I've got a. I got a program too. I brought. Brian, we can pass it around and show you. Yeah, and. Was you know, a great thing is as you look through that program. At that time, there was between the American League and National League, there was 9 members of the Hall of Fame, and that was pretty interesting. For me personally, I got a chance to meet one of his 2 of his players that he played with that 47 team, Jerry Witty, who was an infielder for the Browns, lives in Texas now. He drove up and visited with us one summer. Matter of fact, he came up a couple of different times, had dinner with us, and shared some memories. And another individual is Les Moss, who used to catch for my dad when he was with Toledo. And then when my dad made it to the big time, they roomed together. And Les moved on to, he was the pitching coach for the Houston Astros. And 1989, my dad and I flew to Houston. My youngest sister lives there. and we stayed with her, and we contacted Les. And the pictures that I had passed around, the team picture of the Browns and individual, I had contacted that individual for more copies. And I brought down pictures, and it was really the greatest thing for me. In the Astrodome, I got to meet Les. I was down on the field, Dad and I, which was great. You know, he hadn't seen Dad in a number of years. And obviously the story started to fly, and the reminiscing, and so I mean, just be there to see a part of that and be a part of it, I guess at my young age, and to listen to that kind of thing, to me that was the greatest thing that any son could ever go through, and I really appreciated that. And I guess you know, the way listening about the players and everything, you know, Dad would always just put emphasis on how back then they played for the love of the game. Everybody, it wasn't with your Stan Musials and Ted Williams and your great players of that kind of magnitude, Joe DiMaggio's. You know, they didn't worry about the money. You know, there wasn't that much of a difference as far as a pay scale between that kind of a player versus, say, a relief pitcher or a utility player. So, and he said it was nothing like playing in the Sportsman's Park in St. Louis. He said that was quite a facility. And so I guess the first time I attended a Major League Baseball game, I went to Cleveland and watched a game there, and I guess I had backflashes of, I guess, the similarities of the old ballparks. There was quite a bit of that, so, you know, it just was kind of neat to know that to be in a stadium like that. I mean, my dad played there, so it's quite a thing just to find out so many different things, and I want to thank you all for inviting me to participate in something like this. It means a lot.
I don't know that they came in a little bit late, but did everybody get introduced to Walt's other son and grandson here? Brian, right? Brian and Chris?
This is maybe one with Kenny about, I had a clipping. I was going through different, the box of old newspapers and paraphernalia here, and I ran across a Post Journal, 1950, when Dad played at that time with the Steel Petition Bombers, and looking down through, they played Team Ludlow, and I think Kenny could put emphasis on how, and Brian also reiterated how tough they were, and I guess Dad threw a one-hitter, and they beat him 1-0, and it just seemed like every time they played Ludlow, but the Steel Petition Bombers, like I said, they had quite a lot of talent and a lot of local crowd.
Thank you.
The opening day for the town of Ellery Little League to honor its very own big league pitcher. Saturday was Walt Brown Day in Bemis Point. The 74-year-old is one of the top ball players ever produced by Chautauqua County. He played in the major leagues in 1947 and finished with a perfect record, 1-0 with the old St. Louis Browns. He pitched against some of the big stars and remembers getting Ted Williams out.
You remember what pitch you threw to Ted Williams to get him out? Fastball, curveball?
Well, just throw it and make it a strike. Try to get him to hit where somebody was. I played with some good ones. Vern Stevens, Ellis Kinder. It all went by so quick.
Brown was an original inductee into the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, and he added a big league touch to Saturday's colorful opening day ceremonies, which included a parade of Little Leaguers through Bemis Point. Coming up next on WKSN News.
At the same Hot Stove Luncheon, where we discussed the career of Walter Brown, we also had the privilege of talking to Sidney Wallace. Sidney Wallach was, for a brief period of time, a sports writer for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and covered the St. Louis Browns. He was in the World War II and graduated from Washington University in St. Louis. He was with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch as a sports writer, and before that, a reporter and a rewrite man with the New York Herald Tribune in Paris. After the war, he became a military historian of the U.S. 7th Army and also was a newswriter, director, and producer for the American Broadcasting Company. He then became vice president of Grand Advertising, vice president of Massey Ferguson, executive vice president of W.R. Grace, and at the time of this event was the president of WATV, which is a management firm. An extremely interesting gentleman, Sidney Wallach.
Wrote a story. Everybody thinks Bill Beck invented the midget thing, but it was Ring Lardner who wrote a story called You Could Look It Up, and it was about a ball club that threw a midget up at the plate, and he warned him, don't you swing at the ball, and he did. He hit the ball, and everybody was laughing so hard that they couldn't pick up the ball, but it took them about an hour and a half to get to first base, you see, and they finally, the story ends with them, with the owner picking up the midget by the legs, and twirling him around and throwing him out the center field, and the center fielder catches him, and the umpire says, you're out. But that's when the midget thing started, was with Ring Lardner. I don't really know where to start. When the war was over, I'd been in Europe for a while, and they sent me to England on the way to Japan. The war in Japan was still going on, and they put me in an amphibious division. You know, those days they were ready to invade Japan. And fortunately, that war ended, and they sent me back to France, and through a series of coincidences, I'd only been to high school. I made my way to Paris and walked to the New York Herald Tribune, and by God, I got a job at the New York Herald Tribune, writing sports. I used to make it a 4-page newspaper, and half of the last page was a sports page, and I got to make that up and got to write stories once in a while. Of course, no baseball in Paris, but there was a lot of boxing and stuff like that, and I got a couple of bylines. Those bylines that got me the job on the Post-Dispatch. But I finished with the Herald Tribune, went back to St. Louis, got into Washington University, and I went downtown one day and ran into J. Roy Stockton, who was the sports editor of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and I showed him my articles, and Roy said, how'd you like to come to work for us for the summer? I was in college then. And, you know, this is like a dream. You know, 21-year-old kids didn't go to work for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch sports department for summer. I mean, this is what every kid wanted. But by God, he took me in, and that was in 47. 47. Well, you got to forgive me. That's 50 years ago. I lose some of it. But anyhow, the baseball writer for the Browns was Dent McSkimming. I don't know if that rings a bell with you or not. Dent McSkimming. Now, like a lot of baseball writers in those days, Dent was no slouch. He spoke Spanish, and he spoke Russian. He was fluent in 2 languages. He did clay sculpture. He was an extremely intelligent man. And around August, when Sportsman's Park would get like a concrete palace, you know, that infield, I mean, it was, you could bounce a ball 2 stories high off that infield.
Well, there's 2 teams playing on it.
Yeah, there's 2 teams playing. That's right. The Browns owned Sportsman's Park, but they leased it out to the Cardinals, and the 2 teams playing on it. No time. That's right. The Browns owned Sportsman's Park, but they leased it out to the Cardinals, and the 2 teams playing on it. no time, you know, to do this stuff. Well, dead skipping around August couldn't stand it anymore, and he'd head off to Mexico and hole up in a room someplace and forget that he ever covered the Browns. And when that happened, while the rest of the guys on the paper would get a chance to cover them, and I still recall it, the press box, you climbed up 128 steps, 128 steps, and you walked across a catwalk and got into that press box. And you talk about midgets, boy, when you look down on that field, those people were about 3 inches high. I mean, you couldn't tell what was going on. Story, you got to remember in those days, but by the way, don't misunderstand me, I maybe covered 3-4 ball games my whole life with the Browns. I was a really junior writer. In those days, you had maybe 7 editions to the paper. You know, Buffalo News now has, I think, 1 edition. But you had 7 editions, maybe 8. And when you were writing baseball, you had a typewriter in front of you, and you had a telegrapher next to you. I mean, a real telegrapher, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da. And as you'd write, he'd send it. There was a guy on the other end in the newspaper with a headset on, and he'd by God, put it on the paper, and it would go in the paper. If you were wrong, if you made a mistake, forget it. He sent it. He was right with you. He was a word behind you. Now, he would do, remember in those days they used to do the play-by-play in the paper? He would do the play-by-play. You didn't have to do that. You know, Johnny Bernardino struck out on 4 pitches, right? He'd do that. But you had to write new leads about every second inning. You know, after 2 innings, the Browns were losing 3-2, after 6 innings and so forth. You'd write these new leads and they'd send them in. Then when the game was over, you'd sit there and you'd write a fresh story. And then you go down to the paper and you do what we called an overnight story, which was a real think piece, you know, on why they lost it. And anyhow, the Browns, you know, it was Major League Baseball. It was Major League Baseball, and I don't know if you guys know the story of the Browns about that time. Dick Muckelman, wasn't it, that owned the Browns? That might have been after your time. But he sold the club. You brought up San Antonio. The Browns had a farm team down in San Antonio, and somehow the city had taken over the land. And he had to build a new ballpark in San Antonio. Now, after the war, the Browns had $600,000 or $800,000. They had a lot of money for those days. But by the time he built that ballpark down there and redid Sportsman's Park, he was broke. He just handled it bad. And so he sold the club to Don Barnes. And Don Barnes sold it to the DeWitts. And the DeWitts sold it to Bill Beck. And Bill Beck right away wanted to move that ball club up to Milwaukee. But he couldn't because Milwaukee was the AAA franchise of the Braves. So then he wanted to move it to Baltimore, but the owners hated Bill Beck so much that they weren't going to allow him to do anything at all. So Bill Beck had to sell the club to, I forget who he sold it to. He sold it to somebody, and then they permitted them to move the club to Baltimore. They wouldn't let Bill Beck make a nickel on it. And you could ask Dick King about Major League Ball Club owners. Dick was very instrumental when we were trying to get Major League Baseball into Buffalo. And boy, they'll turn you down, and that's it. They don't need reasons. They don't need anything. They don't like the way you walk. That's all. That's Major League Baseball. Anyhow, let me see. I got some notes here. Yeah, by the way, when Bill Beck came in, the Browns were drawing about 250,000 people a year. Bill Beck doubled that. They were drawing around 600,000 people a year when Bill Beck owned that club. And I got to tell you a couple of stories about the Browns. Fortunately, I was covering one of them. There's a lady present, she'll have to forgive me. But Bob Moncrief, right-hand pitcher, was on the mound. And I can't tell you what inning it was, but he got short-hopped right in the you-know-what. And he went down like somebody had shot him. I mean, he didn't stagger or anything. He went down. And they got him off the field and put him, relief pitcher. And after the game, I went down to the clubhouse, and there's Moncrief standing in front of his locker, and he looks fine to me. And I said, Bob, that must have hurt. He said, oh, he said, it didn't hit me there. He said, it hit me in the gut, and I swallowed my jaw. And the other story now, Bob Bragg, I don't know if any of you know the name Bob Bragg, but Bob Bragg is one of the great baseball writers of all time, and he became sports editor of the Post-Dispatch. He's now 81 years old, and he lives in St. Louis, and he is a great baseball writer, a great writer, as a matter of fact. He's written a couple of plays, and I don't think they've been produced, but he's a fine writer. And I talked to Bob. I knew I was coming down here, and I thought maybe I'd pick up a couple of stories. And Bob said one of the stories people don't know about was that at the end, I don't know if it was 47 or 48 or 49, I don't know what season it was, but Dizzy Dean was under a commercial contract with the Chicago Cubs. He played for the Cubs at the end, and he was broadcasting for the Browns with, I think, Abbey Street. And they changed stations. I don't know, somebody bought something. And they changed stations. They didn't want Dean anymore. So Dean was a little upset. Then he went to the Browns management and said, I'll tell you what. He said, let me pitch the last game of the season. Well, of course, they were in 8th place. The Browns, remember the saying, first in booze, first in shoes, and last in the American League. That was St. Louis. His got a release from the Chicago Cubs for that one game, and he was the last game of the season, and he went out and pitched. And he was throwing sidearm, all right? He got 4 innings of scoreless ball. 4 innings, they didn't score on him. At the bottom of the 4th inning, he gets a hit, no kid out, got a hit, slid into second base, jammed his foot. And his wife was in the stands and said, I hope to God they get him out of there before he kills himself. And they did, they took him out, and he didn't have 5 innings and never got credit for the game. Okay. So you can look it up all you want, but Dizzy Dean pitched the last game of one of those seasons.
Incredible. Cubs sports writer. You go up there, did you have press credentials? Did they have a tag? So, did you have a problem getting in the ballpark?
No, you just told them. That's the funniest thing. Everybody thinks, that you had a little thing in your hand or a press card or something like that. You didn't have anything like that. You just went and said, I'm from the Post-Dispatch. I'm covered.
Yeah.
Now, one thing about the Post-Dispatch is we were the only newspaper in all of North America that paid its own way. You see, it was the habit of the ball clubs to pay the way of the writers. They, you rode on the train and you paid your hotel. Post paid your way. So when you were up in that press box, you wanted a Coke, well, you bought it. By the way, another interesting story. In the late years, the Browns' spring camp was in Burbank, California. And they stayed at the Hollywood Roosevelt, the Hollywood Plaza Hotel on the corner of Hollywood and Vine. And 5 years after that, I had an office in the Taft Building, which was on the corner on Hollywood and Vine. So, what comes around, it's always there. Trying to think of any other stories related to the Browns. Oh, yeah. I used to work, you talked about cover reporters. Of course, I worked summers, and One of the summer jobs is you got in there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you cleared the overnight sports wire, and you set up, you know, the page and that sort of stuff. You had jobs to do early in the morning. We had a sports writer emeritus, John E. Ray, W-R-A-Y. And John Ray had been sports editor of the Post-Dispatch since, I don't know, 1830 or something. He had been there forever, and his eyesight had gone. Well, in those days, we didn't have air conditioning in the sports room.
And we don't have in this room either.
Yeah. And every desk had a spittoon. And every night the women would come through and they'd empty these spittoons in a big bucket and they'd wash them out and they'd put antiseptic water in there. It smelled like crazy. But the guys, and everybody smoked in those days, you'd take your cigarettes, you didn't have an ashtray, you threw it in the spittoon. Well, every morning, John Ray, this old man, he was blind as a bat, but could still write his column. Every morning he'd get up from his desk and he'd stagger around his desk and he'd kick over one of those goddamn spittoons, you see. And of course my job was to grab a bunch of copy paper and I'd throw it on the floor to sum that up. And I'd move that spittoon all over the place. And once a week, old John E. Ray would find that spittoon and kick it over and suck it up. So it was the tales of that stuff. Anyhow.
At that same Hot Stove Luncheon was Dick Ressler. Dick had previously been to a Hot Stove Luncheon where he described his days playing with the Knoxville, Tennessee teams and then ultimately becoming a member of the St. Louis Browns farm system. Here's Dick's story, a most fascinating one.
Well, to mix this with the food I'm about ready to eat. I go back to 1927, 1928. And I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee with my father and mother and a brother. We played baseball back in those days, and the first time my father saw me, I was catching without any shin guards, no breast protector, no mask, and a glove about ready to fall apart. Well, since our family was in the leather business, my dad took me down to his store and he made me a catcher's mitt to fit my hand, the shin guards, and the breast protector, and also a mask. So when he noticed that I wanted to be a catcher, he was a catcher, so he said that I'll remember this fluently. I'm going to teach you guys how to play baseball. And that was back in those days. But in 1927, Babe Ruth and the Yankees came to Knoxville, and they played the Smokies, and that's the name of the team in Knoxville. And I got a baseball signed by all of the baseball players in 1927, and I just sold it 3 weeks ago. 3 months ago. 3 years ago. I'll get it in a minute. But you know, I go back and I think about all the things that my dad done for us. It just shows you how you can be together with your children and make a lot out of it. He managed this team that I played on, and they're called the Little Smokies. And lo and behold, we won all of the American Legion teams that came into Knoxville. I played on all of them, and my dad managed the team. And we won the state championship in Knoxville, and it was played off in Kingston, Tennessee. I don't know if you folks know anything about Tennessee, but that could go for a long, long time. But why don't we eat a little bit here?
Absolutely.
Think of it again. The shin guard's out of bamboo, really. And it was a cloth, and he sewed up all of it. And I remember that. And the breast protector was the same thing. That was going this way. And now, I don't know. I don't know where they're at or what. But I was sure pleased when he made me that mitt. Before that, I tried to catch a ball and hit it on the side. The mitt would go right around in my hand like that. So small.
But you had that baseball in your family all those years.
They did. And another thing, too, that was a very unusual game to me to remember. In the city of Knoxville, they had this baseball stadium. And on the outside of the fence, right in center field, they got the American flag. And on the outside, they had a cinder road. Beyond the road, they had a playing field for the children. And beyond that, there was a creek. Dave Ruth hit a ball that day over the flagpole, over the where the swings and stuff were for the kids, and over that creek. They figured it was close to 500. It was just something nice to see.
Was it a big crowd? I mean, was there a lot of fanfare when you...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Was he a big guy? I mean, in the sense...
Upper torso was huge. His legs were like spindles. But the rest of him, that's where he got all the power. I know, it's in his shoulders.
And Gary...
I was a young kid. He sort of patted me on the head and told me, now, don't give up baseball. Keep playing all the time.
Yeah, very encouraging.
Yeah. Mayfield, Kentucky, in the Kitty League, Johnny Newman was playing for Hopkinsville in the Kitty League. Hopkinsville, to me, was one of the nicest ball diamonds and stadiums in the whole country. They had concrete fence on the outside, and it was just beautiful, just immaculate grass cutting, real nice. Yeah. So you and Johnny, you couldn't change him if you wanted to.
Did he have a reputation in that Kitty League? Was he one of the premier players at that time?
Yeah, he was what they call a home run hitter. Yeah. You know, I had to think back when I was playing, the amount of money that I made in comparison to what they're doing today. Yeah. You're going to say that Dick Ressler's a big liar, because I'm going to tell you, I made $125 a month.
Gee, that was a lot of money there, Fred.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yep. A contract, play with Mayfield, Kentucky, and don't you know, when I come home, I come to find out my contract was sold to Jamestown. And they done all of this without even asking me whether I liked it or whether I didn't.
They just sent you.
Chronologically, you started professional baseball in Where?
Well, I started going to spring training in 36, 16 years old. And I went to Mayfield, not Mayfield, but Greenberg, South Carolina. And I stayed there for some time where they gave me an unconditional release. And then when I left there, I told all the guys that I was playing with in spring training that I wasn't going to go home. I'm going up in the coal mines and play baseball from town to town. And I'd done that all summer, and they'd pay me $10, $15, $20 a game.
Where was that?
That was in Kentucky and West Virginia. Yeah. But then, now when I came to Jamestown, we played at Allen Park. They didn't have the stadium built yet. I had the opportunity to play in the stadium after it was built because I was playing catcher and manager of the Westfield Moose. And we played in the stadium several times. Well, Loud remembers them from Westfield. And lo and behold, I think back, what we had was given to us by the people around Jamestown here. And they didn't have anything else all the way around on the outside as well as they had down here.
So Harry Bisgeier would have bought your contract?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you play up in Niagara Falls for
No.
You came right to Jamestown?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we don't know much about Harry Bisgeier. What's your recollections of him?
Well, I don't know how to express my feelings.
Go ahead, it won't go any further.
Well, I mean, I don't care. He's got a living now. But he was to me, an unusual man. He was thinking about dollar signs all the time, but still he wanted good ball players. And a lot of them came from Niagara Falls down here when the transfer was made. I don't know what Lyle. Were you hooked up with that, Lyle? Yeah.
When he had his office down on 2nd Street,
Yeah, yeah.
he was the fellow that tried to instigate
The whole works. I didn't know of anybody else.
Tell me about Allen Park. How it was set up?
I'll tell you the thing that I remember mostly about Allen Park was where the batters were. And everybody that slid into home base gave the catcher all the dirt he wanted. And I mean plenty of it, too. Yeah.
Was there a fence in left field? I'm trying to visualize. I know where the park is, and I know where they played baseball, but was there an actual fence in left field?
Not a fence, but they had like a screen. Lyle probably remembers that.
In left field?
Yeah.
It went from center field to left field.
Yeah.
And then they used the same fence that they used all the way along by the scoreboard.
Where the scoreboard was, yeah.
Now, was the scoreboard, how was the scoreboard, inside the fence or outside the fence?
What's that?
The scoreboard at Allen Park?
We don't answer those kind of questions.
Oh, I stick then, if you...
It was in right field, wasn't it? It was in right field, yeah.
Yeah, I would say a little bit to the right field. You know, speaking about scoreboard, I remember in 1948 when Westfield went to Wichita, Kansas. In 1948 when Westfield went to Wichita, Kansas, the first game that we played there that night was 1:15 in the morning, and the temperature was 1:15. I caught 3 innings, and I dehydrated myself so much I was getting weak and quit perspiring. that I asked the manager, I says, you got to get me a couple of lemons. So I start sweating. Where the hell he got any lemons at 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning? I don't know, but boy, he got them. I ate 2 of them, skin and all. And I started perspiring. And that field was a beautiful field. But there's 2 things that I remember. I was catching, and all of a sudden the dirt went up like this. And I turned around to the ump, and I says, well, that was a strange amount of wind. I said, where the hell did that come from? He says, I caused that. I says, what do you mean you caused it? He says, well, look at that right down there by your foot. There's a metal thing. I stand on it, and the thing comes off back at the home plate and shoot it right across it. And he stood on it, and well, I'm telling you what, it took dirt and everything away.
The umpire did?
Huh?
The umpire did?
Yeah, it was built right in the ground. Then the other thing was the scoreboard. It was a huge scoreboard. But on top of the scoreboard, there was a duck. Every inning, that duck would start quacking. You could hear it all over the baseball field. And it got to the inning that we were playing, and if it was a 1 run or a 0, it went quack, 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 and the damn thing went right down into the slot. I never saw one like that again the rest of my life.
That was Allen Park.
Believe me, if that would draw 1 extra fan, he'd do it.
Do it. Where did you guys change at Allen Park? Did you have a clubhouse? You have a locker room clubhouse at Allen Park?
Uh-uh. Didn't have nothing. At that time, I was living in YMCA. And I was just going to bring it up. I was looking here on my notes. We had to go to Canada to play a doubleheader. And I caught both of them. Well, the first game, in about the 3rd inning, there was a guy on 3rd, and the score was tied. Johnny O'Neill was playing shortstop. And the batter gets up and he hits a grounder, boom, and Johnny grabs it. And I'm blocking home plate. And he throws that sucker underhand, and it hit me right in the chin. You can see the scar right there. Knocked me out cold. When I woke up, here's the manager rubbing my left leg. And I looked at him and I said, what do you do with my legs? He says, well, I thought the man slid into you. I said, yeah, maybe he did. But I said, the blood was dripping down my I said, here's where I got hit, right there. Well, you know, I finished that game. The second game, it was in about the 4th or 5th inning. I get a tick foul, and it takes this fingernail, whop, right straight up like that. So I go over to our bench. I asked the manager, I said, where's the medical kit? He says, oh, God, he says, I left that thing back in Jamestown. So I said, oh, okay. So I went over to their bench. They didn't have one. He says, I got a pair of pliers. I said, give me the pliers. I put the pliers on and I pulled that nail right off. Finished catching the game. We got on the bus after the 2 games that we played, came back to Jamestown. This was the wee hours of the morning. And I did not know that my father he came all the way up from Knoxville, Tennessee to see me play ball. And I happened to be in. So he found out that I was in the YMCA, and he woke me up. And he said, what? He says, you look like you've been hit by a freight train. I said, what do you mean? Well, he says, go look in the mirror. Well, I did, and this here, my God, it was really swelled right up, you know. And then I come to, this really hurt then. But when I was playing ball, it didn't hurt. Yeah, he was quite a man, a good pitcher.
Did you recognize, you know, he was there when you were there, right?
Yeah.
Did you recognize that there was any extraordinary talent there, or is he just one of...
Just a good ball player, pitcher. And he didn't say too much. Didn't talk too much. I think that's why he was a good pitcher.
Why did he look at you, Lyle?
Now see, they helped us. Now see, they helped us out a little bit there.
Do you remember where Magby stayed when he was here?
No, I don't.
He didn't stay at the Y with you, or?
He was quite entertaining. Was Frankie Heller.
Oh, yeah. I remember Frank.
What's your recollections of Frank Heller?
Just what you said. He got a lot of mouth, and he really knows how to talk.
But I think of Frank Heller and shyness.
He was one awful nice guy, though. Yeah.
When he came to the ballpark, he was sober.
Yeah.
Never went out on the ball field.
That's right.
After that,
Yeah.
I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah.
What kind of crowds did they get at Allen Park, spectators?
Well, they roamed around. They'd come and go, and didn't have any seats or anything like that. No stadium. But we'd get quite a crowd. 2,000 or 3,000.
I can remember good crowds.
Yeah.
For the size of the field, good crowds at
Yeah.
Allen Park. I used to.
Remember who else was on that 1940 team, Dick, the other players?
Well, I think I mentioned Dwayne Schaefer.
Dwayne Schaefer?
He's deceased. Dick Smith, the pitcher. Let me see. Frank Smirker. Yeah.
Charlie Flitt.
Charlie.
Flitt.
I don't remember.
He was later. Later.
Yeah,
He was in 42, I know. 42.
I don't remember him.
Frankie Heller was your first baseman?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then O'Neill, he played shortstop?
Yeah. And then Bobby Blanchard, he played third base. And Smitty, I can't remember his first name, he played second. You mentioned him, Smith?
Are you speaking about 1941 now?
40.
Was it Bradley, the second baseman, Alvin Bradley?
I can't remember.
So you played, just to continue the chronology, then your contract was sold by up here to Jamestown. You played 1940 with Jamestown Falcons.
That's right.
And then 1941, you played with player manager.
Jamestown.
For Jamestown.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also played with.
Now, that's the year that I enlisted in the service, Air Corps. Yeah.
Is that 41 or 42?
41.
41?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you were under contract at one point with the St. Louis
St. Louis Browns. And I found out later on, after I came back from being in the service, William O. DeWitt owned my contract. He was the owner of St. Louis Browns. And my contract was sold to, what the hell is that one in Ohio? Can't think of it right now. But he blacklisted me for 5 years because I wouldn't go to spring training after I got out of the service. So knowing that I was blacklisted and I had a family and I didn't want to be traveling all over the countryside. I didn't say anything to anybody, and I just kept working, and I found that out later on, that that's where my contract went to.
Did you want, when you got back to the service, was that an interest of yours to get back into professional baseball?
I thought an awful lot about it, but I had a family, and I sure didn't want to be traveling all over the countryside with a couple of kids and my wife.
Because you played in an outlawed league, you
Probably could have, yeah. But he said he blacklisted me for 5 years. Well, I've never personally talked to the guy, but if he did, he did. That's all that's gone by right now. And I was trying to think. The Ohio team was, damn, I shouldn't have remembered that. August the 18th, I took my retirement from the courthouse. And with the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department and the courthouse, I put in 44 years of law enforcement.
Wow. Wow.
And I enjoyed every day. I left there as a senior investigator, sergeant, and I would have stayed on longer, but after a while, you think 2 or 3 times, you know. People I worked with were people I loved to talk to. It was really nice to work that job. And I'll tell you a little something secret about that job. Charles C. McCluskey was their incoming sheriff. At that time, I went to work there. And he found out that I lost my father and my brother wanted to go to work on the railroad, get that mighty old check, you know, every week or 2. So I run the place of business alone and working 16, 18, 20 hours some days. So he contacted me and asked me to come to his office. He wanted to talk to me. We sat down and talked for a little while. I agreed to go to work for him. Now, the catch is this. I never asked that man what kind of money he was going to pay me. And my first paycheck, I got to figuring it out, I made $2,250 a year. Got paid once a month. And I had 2 kids, and I had my wife working for the Chautauqua County Boy Scout office as head bookkeeper. Put both of my kids through college. But back in them days, you worked and you worked. You didn't go out and go hobnobbing with anybody. You got up in the morning, you went to work. That's the way it was. And I enjoyed it too. But McCluskey, he got that job through, there was a guy that actually won the race here in Jamestown, head of the Detective Bureau, Dick Monahan. He died of cancer of the throat in December. He was going to take office on January the 1st. So the governor was told about it. McCluskey was selling plywood. He was retired from the FBI. Wonderful man. And the governor asked him to take over the job. And he was there for 12 years. He turned everything into makings of just like the FBI. Really, really nice. But I've often thought about, I went to work for the guy and I didn't even ask him how much money he was going to pay me.
Just glad you got a job.
That's true, yeah.
So the one that you kind of reflect back and say, that was Dick Ressler's finest hour.
Well, we had a championship between Mayfield, Kentucky and Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And the score was really tight. And don't you know, the batter gets up and hits a pop fly right on the baseline, going to first base. And then he starts running to get to the base. He starts running to get to the base. And our first baseman stood there and he puts up his fist like that. And the guy run right into his fist and knocked himself out. I'll never forget that. And that was a championship game, too. Yeah. He just stood there like that, you know. And the guy run into it. Wow.
Strong suit, Dick, as a catcher or a hitter? Or?
No, my arm, my throwing. We played down in Olean one time, Jamestown Falcons, and we played, Olean had a team, Bedford, I think they called Bedford field, baseball field. And before the game, they had a lot of all different things that you could do. All the catchers on each team had a chance. They put a cardboard box on second base. They give you 3 chances to throw in the box. The first 2 I throwed in that box, right in the center. And the third one, they give you 3 times, hits the ground and it goes in the box. And they gave me Silex coffee. They just came out with glass like these things now. Man, I thought that was the biggest thrill I had in my life. Yeah. And they had fungo bats. You remember them fungo bats? Boy, I'm telling you, some of them guys could hit a ball. Oh my God. But they'd run bases. Talk about running bases. Went to spring training, and the coach down in South Carolina, he had a stopwatch. And you start out at home plate, and you go around the bases. Well, I run around the bases, you know, and just about, I thought, well, I got it made now. He says, keep going, keep going. I run that thing 5 times, you know. I came in and I was pooped, I'm telling you. But he done that to build your legs up. And back in them days, I didn't think that really needed to be done, but that's what he was doing.
Who was the best pitcher that you ever caught?
Oh, boy, let me think. We had a guy, I didn't want to mention him.
No.
Oh, well, I'll send him a letter. But we had a guy, he was from Texas, Ray Minor. He throwed a ball 100 miles an hour. But he could not remember signals.
Must have been fun.
And you know, what happened? This particular play I'm thinking of, I called for a low outside pitch. The batter was right-handed. And I'm sitting over here behind home plate, right where the line is, waiting for the ball. So what the hell happens? The ball comes up here, and the batter swings at it, and it ticks and hits me right in the goozle apple here. Well, I started falling backwards, you know, and it's 60 feet to that stadium. I went all the way back, and I hit my back on the stadium wood, and I just sat there. Here comes the kid that throwed the ball. Says, Dick, you're all right? You're all right? I says, you know, I ought to get up here and hit you right between the damn eye. Can't you remember? Oh, I give him hell, you know. It's like talking to a brick wall. You know,
Probably right-hander.
but that guy, if he could only put his noodle up to his arm, he'd be in the major last time I saw him. But he was something. 6'3". Big, big. In fact, he even told me one time that he was what the hell they call him, a cowboy on the ranch down there in Texas. But those days, you think about those, I don't know.
Did you ever catch a no-hitter?
No. I've caught an awful lot of no scores.
We always hear about the pitcher's emotion pitching a no-hitter, but I often wondered what the catcher's emotion was calling and catching a no-hitter. That's got to be very emotional for the catcher, too.
You know, that's something that I think back. I tried to memorize every ball player that comes to bat that we were playing. And it pays off. If you can just remember now, he took a swing at this one, low outside pitch. Or he went for the biggie up here. Those, if you can remember every one of them, they got 9 players, same as you got, see? But it's hard to remember.
The strike zone when you played ball was armpits to knees?
Oh, yeah. And you know, we had a guy named Charlie Mumford. He was a pitcher. And he went with the Brooklyn Dodgers after he left Westfield. And that guy, he throwed the sharpest drop that I think I ever caught in my life. And I could always tell if he was really on the ball or if he wasn't. Because if he wasn't, the ball would hit 3 feet in front of home plate. Wouldn't even get to me. But I'd have to manage around to catch it somewhere or other. And that's where I used to get all these marks of threads on the baseball. And I had plenty of them, too. Yeah.
Were you on a scene in Westfield when Jim Constanti was there?
I remember Jim. Yeah. Jim was a very well-liked man. I was trying to think, he graduated from Buffalo University, I think. I believe. Yeah.
Basketball coach.
You know, you think back of all the ball players that are deceased. There's a hell of a lot of them in our day and time, of the age that we know. Yeah.
That's why we're glad you're here, Dick.
That happens, glad to see you.
I'm sure glad to hear you say that. Yeah, that's like the guy says,
42?
no, not me. I was in the service.
Did you play ball in the service at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I played, we had a team in the Air Force in South America. We go from island down, island, south of Canal Zone, and we won the championship. And that was a lot of fun.
Did your paths in the service cross with any of the major leaguers who played on? They seem to kind of...
No, I actually didn't think too much about that. I mean, we played ball every day except Sunday.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Just to keep busy?
Well, I look back on it, and it was really a peril to me, because I didn't have to work. Only thing I did was play baseball, that's all.
No KP.
No KP, right. Yeah.